with us Vandana Kohli, author and speaker, who would like you to keep a tryst with your inner self. Vandana, all of us are waiting to hear from you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, IEIA. I find it a tongue twister for giving me this opportunity to be here with you, and thank you every single person who's here today for taking the time to be here for this session. I'm quite pleasantly surprised that the inner has been given so much space. Usually what happens is that the moment we say inner, a first thought that comes is, I have already enough to deal with. I have enough work, enough at work, enough deadlines to meet, enough things to coordinate. You're in the exhibition industry. Enough to update yourself on, as somebody just said, constantly systems are changing. So, why? Why are we here to speak about an inner self? This elusive, vague, intangible inner self. And can something tangible come out of us speaking about it? And at the outset, I'd like to set the foundational or the primary reason why the inner becomes important. And that is that every moment that we engage with, every moment of life, if you wish, is an interplay between the external and the internal. The external prods us. It provides us an event. It provides us circumstance. It provides us an opportunity to interact with people. It challenges us. It spurs us to action. It stirs things in us. It, from the outer, from the external, we are either prompted to respond or we are provoked to react. And we react from an inner mechanism which is in turn a vast ground of early impressions, very important. What were our first impressions when we were children? Our memories, our thoughts, our feelings, what were the emotions that we've experienced? What are the emotions that we continue to experience right now? Our impulses, and most importantly, our instincts. So there is an entire world within. And the outer is fodder for a metaphor, is fodder for inner growth. But why inner growth? Is not the external enough? Is not striving for success or a nicer home or a larger car or a promotion or a greater zone of influence or fame or recognition or more profit? Is that not important? It is very important. It is extremely important. It is extremely significant. Because the outer is the zone of action. It is the zone that tests us. It is the zone that gives us an opportunity to express our potential. But, as Mr. Yogesh Mudra just said, the outer is never really in our control. The outer is very fragile. It takes very little for something to change and very little for it to slip out of our control. This entire session before was about the pandemic. Did any of us see it coming? But why look at something as momentous as the pandemic? Let's look even closer home. The cook doesn't show up. I think every working woman will know what that means. The driver doesn't turn up. You have a stressful day. You have 100 things lined up. And his world is out of control, so he doesn't show up. And suddenly, everything for you, your stress factors, your stress really spikes. Or the children are never really in control. Try controlling a 2-year-old wailing in an aircraft. Or try controlling a teenager with a phone. As they say, it ain't happening. A colleague at work, a file may suddenly come. Your phone may get misplaced. You have all your numbers on it. You didn't have a chance to take a backup. Your computer may crash. There may be a puncture, and then, of course, there can be the pandemic. So, the short point that I'm trying to make is that the external is always holds the threat of being out of control. And therefore, our sense of control of the external often is an illusion. The space which offers us the opportunity to exercise our influence, to give ourselves real choices, lies in the inner. And therefore, to be more effective in the outer, external world, to be more efficient in the external world, it becomes important to engage with the inner, to explore our own inner mechanism, to understand what's going on within us, to acquaint ourselves with the movements that are going within each of us, inside, right here, right now. So how may we begin this tryst, a more conscious tryst with the inner? There are several tools in the offering. I think some of you are employing it. Organizations are employing it. There are all kinds of things to do. There's yoga, there's taking a quiet walk, there's doing an exercise routine, there's listening to music, there's having creative sessions. Every single one of them actually gives us the opportunity to connect with our own selves. But I'd like to offer a few which I found particularly useful, and I hope you would too. One of them really is a stance, where you turn one eye within. A little bit of your awareness is turned inward, to take stock of what is going on with you. Are you anxious? Are you stressed, under strain? Are you overwhelmed? Are you angry? By the way, angry people don't usually never say they're angry. They always say, you made me angry. You said this, so I'm angry. You did this, so I am angry. I am not angry. But I don't want to digress right now, even though I did sense an underlying anger in a very pertinent question that came when I think Mr. Agarwal asked. He said, we've sold land to look after employees, and then they leave us. There is anger there. There is resentment there. And there's blame there also. Every time we are angry, there is one thing that the mind is doing. It is blaming something or someone. And what happens is, it's all right to blame, because blame leads us to identify what the problem is. But often we get stuck in the wheel of blame. And that consumes us. So having one eye inward actually helps us identify what are the moments within. Let's keep blame aside for the moment. When something new comes your way, anything, it could be this session, it could be a slight change in program, it could be a new thought, it could be a suggestion, it could be a new task. What is your first reaction? What is the first thing that happens within you? Do you welcome it? Or do you resist it? Are you open about whatever it's asking of you, or are you unwilling? Because that tells us that there is inner resistance. Anytime we are stressed, anytime we are anxious, there is resistance as a first reaction. The thought is that I have enough already to deal with. I'm stressed, don't tell me anything more. I cannot deal with this. So we resist. And I'm mentioning this here because that becomes, before we even realize it, it becomes a way of being unconsciously. So it requires of us to be conscious in order to break out of that pattern. The moment we realize, oh, this is actually my first reaction to anything coming my way, I have already put space between resistance and put space to give myself the opportunity to respond to it rather than get stuck. That resistance is actually a loop. Fear circuits, I made a film on anger, and the one contribution of the film, it talks to experts all over the world. It was shot here, it was shot in the US, all across the US and in the UK. And the one, it explores various facets of anger. In fact, I will request to play that trailer in context in a couple of minutes. But one thing that film did was it made a physiological, neurological connection between stress and chronic anger. When we are constantly stressed, our brain begins to work in a certain way. There are circuits that develop, and the grooves of that become deeper and deeper. And so before you realize it, there's a default mechanism that's working within, which is why I'm trying to draw your attention to resistance. When that is our first reaction, resistance is our first reaction, we become an obstruction. We become an impediment. We are an impediment for the people we are working with. We are an impediment for the organization, and we are an impediment to our own selves. Because our most natural movement is an onward flow. It's an onward flow. We are most joyful when we have a sense of moving onwards. So resistance blocks that. And therefore, one tool, as I said, is to try to keep one eye within. If we don't, then our energy is completely expended in resisting things rather than just doing that task. And here I'm reminded of this, of a small snippet I had read many years ago, I think in the Reader's Digest, which said that there was this gentleman, he was in a bus, and he had to go, his stop was 15 minutes away, and he saw an elderly lady come onto the bus who asked for a ticket to the same stop. So immediately he got up and he offered her his seat. And she said, no, please, I have no time to sit. There's no time for me to sit. And that's a very telling comment, because it would have taken 15 minutes for him or for her to reach in any case. But because she was stressed, she felt that, I don't have any time. And that's what I'm trying to draw your attention to. That actually it takes lesser energy to just do the work if you're not resisting it. So therefore it is important for us to check what is our first reaction to things that are coming our way. Now, resistance is not an end in itself. There is something that lies behind it. There are only two primary emotions. There's love, and can somebody tell me? There's fear. These are the two primary emotions that there are. They drive everything. Every other emotion, there is either love that lies behind it, or there's fear that lies behind it. So if we are indeed resisting things, then we are stuck inadvertently, unconsciously, in a loop of fear. And therefore it becomes important to ask ourselves, what do I fear? Am I fearing this task that's coming my way? I'm not. And the moment we have that realization, we break out of it. It's actually as simple as that. But it is also a practice. So one eye inward is one suggestion. then I like to think rather, that things that are going on in our mind, we may think, when you resist something, you say, I am resisting. Actually, that's not true. I'm not resisting anything. Is it my mind that is resisting? That's not true either. It is simply a voice in my mind. The voice through all traditional philosophical thought, the mind through all philosophical traditional thought is often considered as the sky, vast, expansive, lucid, clear. That is the nature of the mind. When we have any kind of doubt or any kind of negative thought, it is merely one cloud in that vast expanse of the mind. And so it becomes important to put it in perspective. This is not me speaking. This is not my mind speaking. This is merely the voice of my mind. The voice of my mind is stressed. The voice in my mind is angry. Should we heed it? Yes, we should heed it. It's obviously coming from something that requires attention. But as you heed it, you're able to put it into perspective. Because it's just that one voice. And here I'd like to offer a second tool. Is that voice in your mind is not just in your mind, it's in everybody's mind. The earlier session was on empathy. And there were so many points that came up. I was wondering to myself whether I have enough thoughts to leave with you. Every single body is going through the same problems. Every single person has the same stresses. Every single person is dealing with children, with paperwork, with insurance, with aged parents, and what have you. And here's where I'd like to play a 2-minute clip which I made, which was the film from Anger. Anjali, would you play that for us, please?
Anger is a destructive emotion. We not only destroy others, but we destroy ourselves.
I could kill my children, kill my husband if I could when I get angry.
Angry people always start with you statements. You did this. Rather than, I feel.
Women typically have trouble in expressing it. They've been told they shouldn't. It's not the female job. And men are almost encouraged to be aggressive and assertive.
In terms of what happens to our body is, at a hormonal level, we have what's called the fight or flight response.
When you're highly aroused, your blood pressure goes up, your respiration goes up, your heart rate goes up, pupils on your eyes, they dilate.
It gets triggered from a certain point in the brain, but it spreads rapidly.
I do feel we live in a society now that does seem to chase success and chase success and chase success, and the structures in society make us feel like that's what we have to do, and I don't quite understand who makes these decisions, who says we have to do this.
It's like people are pedaling on this little mouse wheel and they can't get off because they're part of this structure that's moving them forward, and they're almost powerless to get off because they need to pay their mortgages, they need to pay their school fees for their children, they need to keep up with the Joneses or keep up with some financial structure.
What we call being stressed out.
The speed of modern life. Fire hose of information being shot at us.
Things are happening faster and faster and faster.
I personally think that frustration is the key thing.
It is the constant feeling of being frustrated or threatened, of competition, of pressure.
right now, most people in this modern world are seriously out of harmony.
Thank you. I thought I'd use a short clip to drive home the point that we're all in the same boat. The stresses everybody is feeling, even as we gear ourselves up more and more towards technology. I reserve my views on it, but I do think that technology moves at the pace of the mind, and we are ignoring our rhythms, our emotional rhythms, our bodily rhythms. Is it a reality today? It is. We do have to deal with it. But it helps, therefore, to keep one eye in what really we need to keep ourselves together, and not just concentrate all our energies into the outer. So basically, knowing that we're all on the same boat is cathartic. You realize that I'm not alone. It takes the sting out of why me. It's not just me, it's everybody. There's something else also which the anger film talks about, which are primary causes that drive us to anger. There are two primary causes that drive us to anger, amongst many others. We can spend an entire session just talking about anger. The first is hunger. If you're hungry, you're driven to anger. And the second is fatigue. And why am I mentioning these to you? Simply because resistance is created in loops. When either you are resisting something or you meet somebody who's resisting, you meet someone who's angry for no reason, and realizing that there are two primary causes to anger helps us overcome the ego, overcome the obstruction that the ego presents, or overcome the aggression that we feel towards the other. We realize this person is probably tired. This person is probably hungry. So it's all right. And in doing so, you calm your own inner self. It is a tool. And I cannot emphasize enough how much I have used it and how much of use I find it. So when we realize that everybody's in the same boat, it takes away the sting from why me, but the one why remains, which is again something that Suraj talked about when he was talking about Lahari Mahashaya, is that why must everybody suffer? Why must we have so much to deal with? And here I'd like to offer a concept that we're all very familiar with, which again, when put in practice, is an approach, and it's to do with this number 108. I went to Kanchipuram many years ago looking for an explanation to a lot of things that we've heard about. And one explanation on 108, which was offered to me by a Sanskrit scholar, I found of extreme importance. It helped shift the inner completely. Which is, he said, 1 is the number of the sun, symbolically. The sun represents the extreme end of the spectrum of positivity. 8 is symbolically the number of Saturn, and this is interesting. Saturn is the sun's sun, but is on this edge or the pinnacle of the dark spectrum. He represents the darkest point of the dark spectrum. In the middle, there is Shunya or 0, which means that when you put bring both polarities together, there is nothing. It is from something that the two polarities come out. So either there is shunyata in Buddhism, as they say, or it's fullness. It's either the void or the fullness. From this thing in the center, from the central path, from the center point, you have two extremes that come out. That is the first rule of the realm that we inhabit, bipolarity. So, when we look at 108, When we do, our prayer beads have 108. It's a number that crops up for 108 names that every god has. The Mahabharata has 18 chapters. The war was fought on the 18th day. There were 18 battalions. The Vedic mathematics say that, in fact, you check it out, that the sun is, the diameter of the sun is 108 times that of the earth. The distance between the sun and the earth is 108 times the diameter of the sun. The distance between the moon and the earth is 108 times the diameter of the moon. It's very close to actual data. So the significance, the symbolic significance is this, that at every given point in time, I am aware of the two polarities. I know there is positive, I know there is negative, and everything in the middle. And in the awareness of that, I now offer my effort. I now offer my prayer, or I now offer my task. And how does that help? That helps because it does not pierce your expectation. So if you've done something for your employees, or you've done something for a colleague, you are not expecting so much in return that it should dampen you or make you resentful or make you angry. And the last concept that I want to offer you, and I'm keeping this short because I always prefer questions, and I'd be very happy to take questions. But there's one concept, one visual that we come across very often. We see it in corridors, we see it in hotels, we see it at home. It's an entire approach of how to live your life, how to find that balance, how to find that center point. And it is the visual of, Anjali, can you put it on screen for us, please? The Natraj. If that's not clear, I would request you, if it's easy for you, to dig out a photograph on your screen, on your phone screen. But I'll quickly explain to you what it represents. So, in one hand, you will notice in the right hand, there is a hand drum, the Damaru. And the Damaru stands for sound. Sound is the manifestation, sound represents creation. Why? Because when there is nothing, and from nothing for something to manifest, there has to be a stir. Something has to move. And that stir is a vibration, and vibration manifests as sound. So what he's holding in his right hand is the hand drum, which means creation. What he holds in his left hand is fire. Fire is the agent not for destruction, but for dissolution. So if something is created, it will dissolve because it must be therefore created again. And that wheel at the back is what that is about, that this wheel is constant. There will be creation, there will be dissolution, there will be creation, there will be dissolution, from the micro to the macro. We prepare for it inward. It's going to happen inside, it's going to happen outside, it's going to happen in organizations, it's going to happen amongst teams, it's going to happen everywhere. It's a relentless wheel, it keeps moving on. But between creation and dissolution, there is the Abhi Mudra, which is his right hand again, which is fear not. Because between these two, there is opportunity for evolution. There is opportunity for growth. And how may that opportunity come about? His left hand points to his foot, as you can see, not very clear here. And he's pointing to this vanquished demon that he's standing on. The small demon's name is Apasmara, which translates as heedlessness or mindlessness. So he says that there is opportunity for evolution and growth. The only thing we need to watch out for is heedlessness and mindlessness. Be mindful about whatever you do. Be mindful about the light and the dark. everything is of use. The entire spectrum is of use. Prepare yourself for that. The moment you do that, you're not taken by surprise by the smallest task or the largest one. You are internally, there is a shift internally to accept and respect everything and everyone. You needn't agree with it, but you can respect it, pay your respects, and move on. And you needn't necessarily engage with it each time, which is what the ego always asks us to do. Stand there and fight and be aggressive. And aggression then becomes like it's exponential. One person is angry, everybody around you is angry. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'd like to thank Sonia Prashar for inviting me here. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out. I hope that you will mull on some of these thoughts. I know from lived experience that they have helped me immensely. And I'm sure, I'm confident that they would you too, in any situation, however momentous or mundane that you may find yourself in. Thank you. Yes, please. Any questions?
Ma'am, every individual is made of 4 layers. Sthul Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, Atma and Brahman. We are so much busy, focused with the Sthul Sharir itself. There's hardly any time for then going to the Sukshma Sharir of Man, Buddhi, Ahankar. And then further again going to Atma. So what happens, how much ever we'll work on it, still will be left void. So how to cover up that?
I think I'll have to give my talk all over again. This is the approach that I'm trying to break through. It's not that you don't have the time. That is a certain amount of stress that's telling you, I don't have the time. It's not a question of I don't have the time. The amount of time you're taking to resist something is half of that time you need to just do what you're supposed to do to take your boat ahead. Everything that I've explained today does not require any time. It only requires a shift. You could be doing the same task. You could be attending. I'm not propagating. Of course, you could sit for an hour in meditation. You can do your breathing. You can do an hour and a half of yoga. You can do all of that. All of that helps. But my entire approach is, how do I make myself more efficient in my daily work with what is coming my way without having to give it more time? And that's what I'm saying. Simply watch what is coming to you from the outside. It's actually, you need the external. You need to engage with your sthul reality to be able to work the inner. So if somebody, just wait for 5 minutes to see what someone else will come to say to you. Use that as an opportunity to figure out what's going on within you. So I agree with you. I think if we look at it from if we complicate it by thinking I have these 4 layers, of course we have 4 layers. We have more than that. And my contention is that we are using the mind more and more. We're not using the body. Where are we using the heart? And how do we use the heart? If we do not use the instinctive warmth of our hearts, there's something within us that's going to be fragmented, and it is. Which is why I brought up the point of everybody's in the same boat. It allows you to use the warmth of your heart in a way where you don't have to stop, you don't have to go out of your way, you don't have to offer anything in excess, because when you do that, you have the sense of self-righteousness. See how kind I was. And that is another loop. So it is simply to do and move on. It's like the river. The river never turns back and says, oh, I passed this and I passed that. The river can only move ahead. And that's what our natural inner flow is all about. So how do we find, I would think therefore, if I were to rephrase your question, how do I find an alignment with my inner flow? So that every layer within me is taken together. And you do that, you start by first seeing, am I resisting the flow? And if you think you're resisting the flow, then check it. The voice of the mind, as I said, does not need to be ignored. It has to be heeded. But it has to be checked. Because if you don't check it, it becomes a loop. And that loop becomes a circuit in the brain. And the more the circuit we use in the brain, that particular circuit, the deeper the grooves become. So then what happens? Then it becomes the first thing that comes to you, that circuit will spark. I made this film on anger because I was never an angry person, never an angry child. I think Suraj, I don't know whether Suraj knew me in school, but I was never an angry child. I was never an angry young adult. But when I got into my mid-30s, I found I was raging. There was all this anger within, and I wouldn't express it. I was not expressing it. I was imploding within. And then it reached a point where I realized that I was tuning into everybody's anger, and I could feel that everybody was angry. And I would keep a journal. I started keeping a journal, and I began to see patterns in the way of my mind. And I realized that I'm stuck in a loop of anger. My first reaction to, irrespective of what was coming from the outside, my first reaction was one of anger. And it was consuming everything within me. And I reached a point where I thought there has to be another way. Because there's enough reason to be angry. There's enough to blame to be angry. You will find 10 reasons in the day to be angry, but is that helping? I don't think so. We are all hardwired with anger. It is natural. It's part of the primitive part of the brain. It's a little almond-shaped cluster of neurons called the amygdala, which sparks where anytime there's a threat. That threat is usually a threat to your identity or a threat of wellness. And so when that sparks, there's the stress reaction sparks. It's the fight or flight reaction that either I will fight it or I will flee from it. And so what is the body doing? What is the brain doing? The brain is pumping the body with neurotransmitters, with steroids, with adrenaline, and all that is being pumped into the limbs. Because you have to either fight the threat or you have to flee from it. So your hands and your legs have to be strong, but everything else stops. Any other process, which is a process of nourishment, of healing, of repair in the body, comes to a stop because the brain is saying this is not the time. This is not the time to digest your food. This is not the time to replenish your cells. This is not the time for sleep. This is the time to fight. And so those steroids are already in your blood, and when you're stressed and you're chronically stressed without checking it, the brain has constantly pumped your body. Your blood has these levels of steroids which are very high, and you reach a point where there's a small prick and there's a disproportionate outburst of anger. We see it all the time in high-ranking jobs right through the structure. To that guard, to that driver who hasn't slept enough because he's driving your merchandise for 15 hours. So to be aware of the mechanisms within releases us, gives us an opportunity to release us from the same reactions which are not taking us anywhere but are keeping us stuck in a wheel. It's the visual that comes to my mind is, it's like a whirlpool. You're moving in a whirlpool. When you're angry, you think a lot is happening, but nothing is happening. You're just moving. You're just moving in the same wheel, at the same plane. And you're going round and round and round and expending energy. So thank you for asking that question. I hope that I've been able to address some of it. Yes, sir.
was a beautiful talk. You talked about two core emotions, love and fear. I do appreciate the point that you made about the anger is something which is, at the root cause, creating so much of stress and problems and all that. But, I grew in 70s watching the movies of Amitabh Bachchan, right? That iconic angry young man. And that angry young man was all about fighting with injustice happening in the society. Of course, it was a cinematic expression of how to do that using, lathis and dandas and fights and all that. But don't you think for any transformation to happen in a society, unless there is an element of anger, society will not transform itself, trying to do better things, trying to overcome the ills that we see, injustices that we see, and so on and so forth. So is there a way that this anger we all learn to channelize in a constructive way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why I said anger is hardwired in us. It is part of our brains for a reason. That reason is that it must spark us to injustice. That is the primary purpose of anger. But anger is also a dangerous emotion because it is addictive. It feels good to be angry because you're blaming something or someone and you get stuck in that blame. So the angry young man is a very good depiction, in fact, of injustice. Half the time we are not using it for injustice, we're using it only because there is obstruction that we're not able to overcome. Should we use the energy of anger for transformation? That is what it is meant for. There is only one difference in how do we express anger. If anger is expressed as anger, then it's only going to create more anger. Is anger, there is a difference between the emotion of anger and the expression of it. I think most of us would remember in 2007 when there was the 2020 World Cup, Yuvraj Singh had a spat with Broad. I don't know how many of us saw that, but he had a spat with Broad and the umpire had to pull them apart. And then Yuvraj Singh, what did he do? Did he take his bat and hit Broad with it? Yes. He took cognizance of his anger. He went back to his crease. He took his batting stance and he looked at this guy and said, "Show me what you got. And I'll show you what I've got." And he hit 6 sixes. Had he taken the bat and hit him with the head, I would have said he expressed his anger as anger. But he transformed the energy of that anger because he did not express it as anger. He expressed it as something that he could do. He turned the energy to his own potential. And there are texts. I remember attending a workshop. The lady who came right at the end is a Buddhist nun. She's probably the most senior Western lady ordained as a Buddhist nun, and she has a nunnery close to Dharamshala. So in one of her talks, she said that she quoted a Buddhist text which actually recognizes anger as a very pure energy. Because it is extremely intense and it can drive a lot of change. And she says, even if we are aware of anger as it arises, before we express it as anger, as we are aware that this is rising and we have one eye inner and I say, okay, I am getting angry here, in that moment of realization, it is partially transformed. You have put space between the emotion and your choice to express it, right there, by that realization. And therefore, my point of turning that one eye, it's a practice. The more you turn one eye within, the more you take stock. You may not do it immediately. You may do it at the end of the day and say, you know what, this is bothering me. Maybe I should not have reacted that way. And then you take one step behind and say, what made me react that way? I was resisting. Why was I resisting? Because I was stressed. Why am I stressed? Because there's too much on my mind. So if there's too much on my mind, do I need to empty it? Do I need to take a step back? Yeah, I'll take a step back. I'll go for a walk. Or I won't go for a walk. I don't have time for a walk. What's the next thing I need to do? I need to do something with my hands. I need to pull out some files. I need to do some cooking. And turn your attention to anything that you do with your hands. Even for 5 minutes. You can practice cursive writing. They've done a study where they show that children who use a typewriter and who use their hands actually have different skills. Different skills develop. So when you're using the keyboard to type out words, and as opposed to children who write with their hands, they found the kids who use cursive writing, who write with a pencil, have better memory because they're taking the time out to write something. They have better language skills because they're taking the time out to see what is the word and how it is formed and therefore what it means. And most importantly, they have better coping mechanisms. They have better resilience because in writing they have stilled themselves for just that one moment. They're one with the hand, the writing and their concentration, and that gives them better resilience. So you come back to that what can I do for 5 minutes that will bring me back, will give me a break. I'm getting tense, I know I'm getting stressed, I know I'm going to get angry, let me get up and go and get myself a glass of water. Even that is cathartic. So to your question of whether and how, so do we express anger as and sometimes we need to express anger as anger. Sometimes it is important, but in moments of real threat, in moments of real threat to our lives or to the threat to the safety of our family or our loved ones or our colleagues, in moments like that, we really must express anger as anger. I'm not saying that you need to hold it back. All I'm saying is that this is the arc of the emotion, this is the energy of the emotion, this is how it impacts us. So let's make ourselves a little conscious of how we're using it. Otherwise, we're just getting into each other's loops of anger, stress, negativity, and all the rest of it.
Thank you for that beautiful talk and enlightenment. Again, on anger, we get angry when certain things happen, when we perceive in a particular way. But with the same happening, same things, and you perceive in a different way, you probably won't get angry, you get different emotion.
Sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. When certain things happen, when our mind perceives that in a particular way, we get angry. When the mind perceives the same actions in a different way, we don't get angry. We probably may get some other emotion. So at the end of the day, is it about how the mind imagines things? So can one program how to imagine about the actions that are taking place around us? So end of the day, misery and these negative happenings are nothing but imagination of the mind. So I would look forward to your explanation.
It's, I think, less about the imaginings of the mind, it's more about the mind's expectation. When we expect something, we are thwarted. Of course you need to expect. We're all functioning in the real outer world. I have a contention with the real outer also. If I get an opportunity, I'll tell you about that. But we are driven to anger because we have thwarted expectations. You did something, you expected something in return. So, it's alright to expect as long as we have one foot on another rock which says, what is plan B? If plan A does not happen, then what is plan B? If I do put in all my personal resources for my employees and they leave me, what is plan B? Because they've gone. I don't have control over them. That's what I'm trying to say. There's this much control you have over the outer. That's what the session before this said. So what is my plan B? And how do I move on with my plan B? And that frees you. Because if plan A works out the way it was worked out, wonderful, it's a bonus. It feels like a bonus. Rather than you being all stressed and tense about it happening and when it's happening. And if you have plan A doesn't happen, you have plan B. So it is not so much about the mind conjuring up. Yes, actually the mind also conjures up things. You know, we want to motivate ourselves. So we say, when I do this, this is the outcome that will happen. Which is fine. You can do that. That's great. We should plan that. But we begin to enjoy the fruits of the consequence of what we put into action even before it is in action. If I do this, it will be appreciated, and when it's appreciated, this is how I'm going to feel. That's where we trip. And gosh, we trip. Any other questions? Do we have time for one more, maybe? Do we have time? It's over? Okay. I'm going to leave you with one thought, if I may, very quickly, on the outer and the inner, since that's what we've been speaking about. You know, it's a question of orientation also. We've all been brought up to our education, and our thought has brought us, has made us view the external world as real. That's a modern concept. It's the modern Western way of thinking, that this is real. Why? I can touch it, I can see it, I can feel it, I can taste the water, and all the rest of it. Anything to do with the senses, that the senses validates, is real. Interestingly, in the Oriental, in the broader Indian philosophical thought, this is not real. Actually, physics is telling us that now, but we knew it maybe 5,000 years ago, but this is not real. Because anything that will change and anything that will perish is not real. This will change. The building will perish. Everything will go to dust. Our bodies will go to dust. And therefore that is not real. So then what is real? That band of energy within us which inhabits the body. Science tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes form. Quantum physics tells us that there are different bands, and if I'm not mistaken, 8 million bands on which when energy settles, it takes certain form. It takes a certain form. 8 million, I found, is very, curiously, very close to that 84 lakh births that you're supposed to take through different forms, which is what our philosophy, some part of our philosophy speaks about, but I can't validate that, obviously. And therefore, at the end of the day, even as we work, whatever we are working, the external is the fodder, the external is the zone where we test ourselves, the external is equally important, the inner is important as well, because it is the impressions that we are leaving, that the external is leaving with us, which is important. That is what we will take forth and we will carry forward. So, by request, therefore, that even as we engage with the external, we keep one eye on the inner, so that we don't negate the external, but we are more effective and more efficient with it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sonia, for having me over. Special thanks to you. Thank you.
See, I'm sure all of you have introspected, looked within, and if you are doing and busy WhatsApping, please go to Amazon and buy this book, Inch by Vandana Kohli, and you'll not regret it. It's bite-sized wisdom and absolutely brilliant stuff. So we will have Sonia ji coming, or Anbu will come and felicitate Vandana. And I will tell you a cheat code of someone, all of you, the organizers, who were worried that this is extreme technical stuff. It's very easy, and I'll just tell you one cheat code. Vandana is correct. The two emotions in us are love or fear. And as organizers, fear is ruling us every time. What if, what if, what if? What if the construction doesn't happen on time? What if it rains? What if the truck is late? What if? If you can change this question to so what, your brain will give you solutions that so what, this is the answer. So what, this is the answer. And you'll never go wrong. When Vandana was talking about a plan B, all of them, it's in our brain. So what? Start thinking and your brain itself will give you so many new ideas and you say it's so easy. Doesn't matter, truck is late. Doesn't matter, I'll find an LPG truck. Doesn't matter, I'll find umbrellas if it's raining. So what? And it will empower you. Vandana, over to you. I'm going to interact with you.
If I may, to add to Suraj's point, and I talk about it in the book, exactly what he said. My words, what helps me is, I ask myself, is anyone dying? If the truck hasn't come on time, if my stock hasn't left on time, if whatever, is anyone dying? And if nobody is dying, my mind is suddenly clear and not stressed, so that I can look for a solution for the next thing that I'm supposed to do, rather than get stuck in the anxiety that this has not happened. It releases you. So thank you, Suraj.
So on a lighter note, what Vandana said, is anyone dying? I say, मरने के बाद ही स्वर्ग मिलता है. So sometimes better to die so that you can get moksha. But brilliant work, Vandana. I'm sure we will interact with you in future. Some of our concepts are absolutely brilliant. That 108. You must introspect what does it mean. And I can tell you, 108 is also the Father, the Son and the Holy Ghost. 0 represents the ether in between. So Father and Son, the Holy Ghost is in tune with 108. Brilliant stuff.